The Mandarin Oriental's grand ballroom glittered with opulence as I glanced down at my intentionally scuffed shoes. Actually $3,000 custom-made Italian leather deliberately aged to look worn. My father's 60th birthday celebration was in full swing. The elite of corporate America gathered to celebrate Robert Davidson while quietly mocking his struggling youngest daughter. "Look at Emily's shoes," my sister Catherine stage whispered to her husband. "Still wearing the same pair from college. I guess that's what happens when you reject a real career." If they only knew these old shoes had walked through the boardrooms of half the Fortune 500 companies during secret acquisitions. But that was the beauty of being underestimated. People reveal their true nature when they think you're walking in worn leather. "At least try to dress appropriately," my stepmother Margaret hissed as she passed in her Louboutins. "These are important people in business. Important people whose companies Shadow Holdings quietly owned." We'd spent 5 years methodically acquiring controlling stakes in major corporations, though we kept our ownership structure deliberately hidden through a maze of shell companies. My phone buzzed silently, a message from my chief operating officer, James Chin. No relation. Wall Street Journal interview confirmed for 9 p.m. Portfolio valuation set at $4.2 billion. All papers ready. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan's skyline sparkled with possibility. Each gleaming tower housed another company under Shadow Holdings' quiet control, though they thought they were independent powers in the corporate world. "Remember when Emily said she was starting her own company?" Catherine laughed to her audience. "Dad offered her a VP position at Davidson Global, and she chose poverty instead." The irony was delicious. Davidson Global actually operated on infrastructure owned by one of Shadow Holdings' subsidiaries. They just didn't realize their reliable business partner was controlled by the daughter they mocked for her shoes. "Ms. Davidson," a voice whispered. Sarah Lynn, my head of strategy disguised as a server. "Goldman's M&A team is asking about the mystery buyer." I nodded slightly, watching another wave of corporate elite enter. Each of them would soon discover that their company's major shareholder had been quietly observing from scuffed shoes, letting them play at power while actually controlling the board. "Still taking the subway?" My brother Michael smirked, adjusting his Rolex. "When you're ready for real work, I might have an entry-level position." The subway was actually a cover. I owned 3 buildings on Park Avenue. While they flaunted their cars and watches, I'd built an empire that made their fortunes look like pocket change. My phone lit up again, this time from our legal team. "Acquisition documents finalized. Ready for 9 p.m. announcement." I shifted in my worn shoes, watching my family bask in their imagined importance. In 2 hours they would learn that while they were busy mocking my footwear, I'd built the most sophisticated corporate empire in history. "Emily," Margaret sighed with theatrical concern, "your father's friends keep asking what you do." "It's embarrassing." "What I do?" I silently controlled major stakes in 50 corporations, owned significant portions of Manhattan real estate, and was about to reveal myself as one of the most powerful forces in business. But they'd learn that soon enough. My phone buzzed again. Bloomberg exclusive ready. Shadow Holdings emerges. The hidden giant of corporate America. Through the ballroom's windows I could see Times Square's massive screens being tested. At exactly 9 p.m., they would display Shadow Holdings' logo and my net worth to the world. The same logo Michael had called amateur when I'd shown him my business plan 5 years ago. "Ms. Davidson," Sarah whispered as she passed with champagne, "the Wall Street Journal reporter is in position. They're asking about Davidson Global's acquisition." The acquisition they didn't know was coming, not realizing their entire company was about to be owned by the daughter they thought couldn't afford new shoes. The beauty of true power is letting others think they're in control while quietly owning everything. "Ladies and gentlemen," Michael's voice boomed through the sound system. "In 1 hour, Davidson Global will announce the largest acquisition in our company's history." I continued standing quietly in my scuffed shoes, suppressing a smile. In exactly 60 minutes, a very different kind of announcement would shatter their celebration. Around me, corporate titans gathered in anticipation, none of them realizing that the most powerful person in the room was the woman they thought couldn't afford new footwear. "Those shoes are actually painful to look at," Catherine smirked, showing off her new Jimmy Choos. "I suppose this is what happens when you waste time on entrepreneurship." If she only knew these shoes had walked through the signing of deals worth billions. But that was part of the carefully crafted deception. While they focused on appearances, I'd been quietly revolutionizing corporate America. "Emily," Margaret called out sharply, "move away from the VIP table. We can't have you embarrassing us in front of the Goldmans." The Goldmans, whose investment bank had unknowingly facilitated half of Shadow Holdings' acquisitions. I'd orchestrated their largest deals, approved their strategies, and controlled their futures, all while they thought they were independent powers in finance. "Miss Davidson," Sarah whispered as she passed, "CNBC is asking about the mysterious buyer of Midwest Industries." I nodded slightly, shifting my weight between my deliberately worn shoes. The mysterious buyer was another Shadow Holdings subsidiary, part of our carefully orchestrated plan to consolidate power while maintaining anonymity. Until revelation. Through the windows I could see news vans gathering outside the Mandarin Oriental. They thought they were here for Davidson Global's announcement. Instead, they'd witnessed the emergence of corporate America's most powerful hidden force. "Remember when Emily tried to pitch her business plan?" Michael laughed to a group of executives. "Dad said it looked like a high school project." A high school project that had revolutionized corporate acquisitions and quietly gained control of companies worth billions. While they mocked my supposed poverty, I'd been orchestrating some of the largest takeovers in business history. Sarah murmured as she collected empty glasses. Wall Street Journal reporter in position. I continued standing quietly, watching my father hold court near the main table. Robert Davidson, corporate titan, celebrating his 60th birthday while his youngest daughter stood in scuffed shoes. If he'd bothered to check the ownership structure of his recent acquisitions, he might have noticed they all led back to Shadow Holdings. "Emily," Catherine sighed with fake sympathy, "you could at least try to network. These people run the business world. People whose companies I owned, whose strategies I controlled, whose futures would be shaped by what I was about to reveal." The waiters began serving the main course, carefully following Margaret's instructions to serve my corner last. The $600 per plate dinner would be cold by the time it reached me, but that was part of the performance. Davidson Global is about to become the most powerful corporation in America, Michael declared, champagne sloshing. Dad's announcement will reshape industries. My phone lit up with another message, this time from our PR team. All major networks aligned. Times Square billboards tested and ready. "Emily," my father finally addressed me directly, "at least try to look successful. You're embarrassing enough as it is." I met his gaze calmly. "Oh, I'm very interested in success, Dad. In fact, I wouldn't miss tonight's revelations for anything." Catherine sauntered over, designer heels clicking. "Still working on that mysterious company? The one Dad's board said would never succeed." "Something like that," I smiled, thinking about the complex network of corporations that made Shadow Holdings the hidden force behind American business. The room was buzzing with anticipation. Business reporters checked their cameras, executives huddled in groups, and my family basked in their moment of perceived triumph. "Poor Emily," Margaret murmured to her social circle. "She could have had everything at Davidson Global. Now she can't even afford proper shoes." My phone buzzed again, a message from our acquisition team. "Final paperwork complete. Davidson Global takeover ready for announcement." Sarah appeared beside me. "Ma'am, Wall Street Journal reporter approaching." Through the ballroom's windows we could see Times Square preparing to switch. They thought they were here for a merger announcement. They had no idea they were about to witness the emergence of corporate America's true power. "Everyone gather round." Michael called out. "Dad's announcement will change business history." My father stood at the microphone, confidence radiating. "Friends, family, distinguished colleagues." The Wall Street Journal reporter's voice cut through the room. "Ms. Davidson? Confirming your acquisition of Davidson Global for $4.2 billion. The silence was absolute. The silence shattered as every phone in the room began buzzing simultaneously. I remained standing calmly in my scuffed shoes as chaos erupted around me. The Wall Street Journal headline flashed across every screen. Shadow Holdings revealed. America's hidden empire. Emily Davidson acquires family company for $4.2 billion. Corporate America's most mysterious power player unmasked. That's impossible," Michael stammered, his champagne glass slipping from his hand. "Emily can't even afford new shoes." "Can't afford them?" I finally moved from my spot, each step of my worn shoes now echoing in the stunned silence. Or chose not to flaunt wealth while building something extraordinary? The ballroom screens switched to live feeds. Shadow Holdings' true portfolio, our global reach, and the extensive list of corporations we quietly controlled. Each revelation caused another wave of gasps through the crowd. But we investigated every major player. Catherine's voice cracked. Your company wasn't even registered. Because I designed it not to be, I replied, finally showing them my shoe's true pedigree. Shadow Holdings operates through over 300 entities, including, I might add, the companies that supply Davidson Global's core infrastructure. My father stumbled forward, his usual confidence evaporating. The merger we're announcing won't be happening, I confirmed. Shadow Holdings now owns Davidson Global. In fact, we control the majority of corporations represented in this room. The Wall Street Journal article continued scrolling. Shadow Holdings' portfolio includes controlling stakes in 50 major corporations, making Emily Davidson one of the most influential hidden forces in global business. Margaret clutched her Chanel purse like a shield. 4.2 billion, but that would make you the most powerful private investor in corporate America, James said, emerging from the crowd in an impeccable suit. And that's before announcing our other acquisitions. The business reporters in the room had recovered from their shock and were broadcasting live. In an unprecedented revelation, Shadow Holdings has emerged as the controlling force behind America's largest corporations. Its founder, Emily Davidson, who her family mocked for wearing worn shoes. Ma'am, Sarah approached, now in executive attire. The SEC chairman is requesting an emergency meeting. They're concerned about market implications. Through the windows, Times Square blazed with Shadow Holdings' logo. The same logo Michael had mocked as something from a community college project when I'd first shown it to him. All this time, Catherine whispered, staring at my shoes, while we were making jokes about your appearance. I was building an empire, I said quietly. Every major corporate acquisition in the past 3 years? Orchestrated by Shadow Holdings. Those mysterious buyers Davidson Global couldn't identify? All us. Michael made one last desperate attempt. The board won't accept this. They trust Davidson Global. Do they? I raised an eyebrow, projecting another set of data. Check your client list against Shadow Holdings subsidiaries. You've actually been working for me for years. You just didn't know it. James approached with a tablet. The SEC filing is live. Davidson Global's stock will be suspended at market open, pending integration into Shadow Holdings. And speaking of integration, I continued, every Davidson Global employee will receive 2 options tomorrow. Join Shadow Holdings with tripled compensation packages, or accept a generous severance. Unlike some people, I believe in rewarding talent regardless of their shoes. Margaret's social climbing instincts kicked in. Emily, darling, surely we can discuss this as family. Family. I turned to her. Like when you mocked my shoes. Or when you made me eat cold food at my own father's birthday. The screens showed Shadow Holdings' true scope. Business strategies that had revolutionized industries, acquisitions that had transformed markets, and a corporate structure that prioritized innovation over appearances. Tomorrow morning, I addressed the stunned room, Shadow Holdings begins its public phase. Davidson Global will become a subsidiary, its operations modernized, its culture completely rebuilt. My father found his voice again. You'll destroy everything I built. No, Dad. I'll improve everything you couldn't imagine. While you were teaching Michael how to network, I was building the future of business. While you were mocking my shoes, I was revolutionizing corporate America. The daughter you thought couldn't afford new footwear? She now owns your entire empire. Sarah appeared again. Ma'am, international markets are reacting. They're requesting guidance on the transition. I glanced down at my worn shoes, now recognized as a deliberate choice rather than a necessity. Tell them Shadow Holdings protocols are now in effect. And prepare the boardroom for tomorrow's global staff announcement. The ballroom had become a media circus, with cameras broadcasting the transformation live across America. Through the windows, the Shadow Holdings logo glowed bright against the night sky, its power now unveiled for all to see. Ms. Davidson, a final reporter called out, one last question. Why maintain the appearance of poverty for so long? I looked down at my shoes, thinking about the years of careful planning, the quiet acquisitions, the patient wait for this perfect moment. Because true power doesn't need to show off, I replied. Sometimes the best way to build something extraordinary is to let others underestimate you. While they were judging my shoes, I was quietly becoming their owner. As my helicopter lifted off from the building's helipad, I looked down at the transformed skyline. Sometimes the person they mock for being poor becomes the one who owns the building. Sometimes the greatest victory comes from letting them think you're struggling while you're actually conquering. And as for these shoes, I think I'll keep them. After all, some of the best deals in history were made by someone everyone underestimated, quietly building an empire while they weren't looking. The shadows continued to spread across Manhattan, each glowing sign now a reminder that sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one they thought couldn't afford to be there. As the news continued to break across global markets, the headlines told the story that would reshape corporate history. The Shadow Rises: How a Poor Daughter Built a $4.2 billion empire. America's New Queen: Emily Davidson's path from scuffed shoes to corporate dominance. From mockery to mastery: the hidden force behind corporate America. Davidson Global's offices were buzzing with activity as employees discovered their new reality. The tripled salaries and enhanced benefits sparked celebration among the staff, while the executive floor remained eerily quiet. Michael's corner office, the one he'd bragged about for years, was being transformed into Shadow Holdings' strategic command center. Catherine's precious executive lounge would become an innovation hub. And my father's elaborate suite? The new employee development facility. "Ma'am," James reported, 99% of staff have accepted Shadow Holdings offers. The remaining 1% are exclusively from the old executive team. I smiled, thinking about the lessons in humility that would follow. Sometimes the best view of success isn't from the shiniest shoes. It's from worn ones, watching, waiting, and building something revolutionary while others are busy showing off their expensive footwear. The shadow had revealed itself, and its power would forever change the landscape of American business.
The call came at 2 a.m., jolting me awake from an already restless sleep. "Emma, it's Dad," my sister Sarah's voice cracked through the phone. "He's gone." I sat up, my heart pounding against my ribs. Gone. The word echoed in my head, hollow and final. Even though we'd known this day was coming, Dad had been sick for months. Nothing could have prepared me for this moment. "I'm at the house now," Sarah continued, her voice steady. "You should come. There's paperwork we need to handle." My name is Emma Chen, and at 32, I was about to learn just how quickly family ties can unravel when money enters the picture. Dad had built his tech company from nothing, turning it into a $15 million empire through decades of relentless work. Now, with his passing, everything was about to change. I arrived at our family home just as dawn was breaking. The sprawling Victorian mansion looked exactly as it always had, pristine and imposing, but something felt different. Empty. Sarah met me at the door, her designer outfit immaculate despite the early hour. She'd always been the polished one, the daughter who perfectly fit into Dad's world of board meetings and charity galas. "You look terrible," she said, eyeing my hastily thrown-on clothes. Classic Sarah, always ready with a cutting remark. "The lawyer's waiting in Dad's study. We need to go over the will." I followed her through the familiar halls, past photos chronicling our family's history, Mom's death when we were teenagers, Sarah's graduation from business school, my art gallery opening that Dad had missed because of an important meeting. Each image told a story of choices made and paths diverged. The family lawyer, Mr. Richardson, sat behind Dad's massive oak desk, a stack of papers laid out before him. His expression was unreadable as we took our seats. "Ladies," he began, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "Your father was very specific about his wishes." He pulled out a document, clearing his throat. "To my daughter Sarah, I leave my entire estate, including the family home, my company's shares, and all associated assets." The words hit me like a physical blow. I waited for the rest, for my name to be mentioned, but there was nothing. Just silence, heavy and suffocating. "That's it?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "He left me nothing." Mr. Richardson shuffled his papers uncomfortably. "I'm afraid so, Miss Chen. Your father's will is quite clear on this matter." I turned to Sarah, who sat there with an expression I couldn't quite read. Was it pity? Triumph? Did you know about this? She shrugged, examining her perfectly manicured nails. Dad always said he wanted someone responsible to take over the company, someone who understood business. Her eyes met mine, cold and distant. Let's be honest, Emma. You chose to pursue art instead of joining the family business. What did you expect? The room started to spin. I had known Dad was disappointed in my career choice. But this felt like a final rejection, a posthumous slap in the face. I need some air, I muttered, stumbling to my feet. But before I could reach the door, Sarah's voice stopped me. Oh, and Emma, you'll need to move out of your apartment by the end of the month. It's technically part of Dad's property portfolio now, so... I whirled around, stunned. The apartment I'd lived in for the past 5 years, the one place I felt truly independent, was actually owned by Dad. You can't be serious. Sarah's smile was all business. I'm just following Dad's wishes. You understand, don't you? It's nothing personal. Nothing personal. As if evicting your own sister was just another day at the office. I fled the study, tears burning in my eyes. In the hallway, I caught a glimpse of myself in one of the many ornate mirrors. Pale, disheveled, lost. How had it come to this? That night, back in my soon-to-be former apartment, I sat surrounded by my paintings. Each canvas represented hours of work, dreams poured onto fabric in swirls of color. Dad had never understood my art, never seen it as anything more than a hobby. But it was my life, my passion. And now, thanks to his final act of disapproval, I was about to lose everything. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Don't forget to leave the keys with security when you move out. And Emma, try not to make this difficult. I stared at the message, anger and hurt warring inside me. Sarah had always been Dad's favorite, the perfect daughter who followed his path without question. But this felt different. This felt like betrayal. The next few weeks passed in a blur of boxes and goodbyes. My gallery customers were sympathetic but distant. News of my family drama had already spread through our social circles. Sarah, meanwhile, wasted no time settling into her new role as CEO of Chen Technologies. I watched from afar as she gave interviews about continuing our father's legacy and keeping the business in capable hands. The day I handed over my apartment keys, something inside me broke. I had nowhere to go, no safety net to catch me. My art sales barely covered living expenses even when I had free housing. Now, I was truly on my own. You really should have thought about your future, Sarah said when I called her, desperate for help. Dad tried to teach us about financial responsibility, but you never listened. This is just a natural consequence of your choices. I ended up moving in with my best friend Grace, sleeping on her couch while I tried to figure out my next move. Each morning, I'd wake up to news headlines about Sarah's latest business triumph or social appearance. The papers loved her story, the devoted daughter carrying on her father's work. Nobody seemed to care about the other daughter, the one left with nothing. But fate had other plans. 1 month after Dad's death, I received an unexpected call from Mrs. Zhang, our old housekeeper who had practically raised us after Mom died. Emma, she said, her voice urgent. There's something you need to know about your father's study, about the safe behind his portrait. I sat up straighter, my heart racing. The safe. What about it? Your father made me promise not to tell anyone until after the will was read. But now, she paused, taking a deep breath. There's something inside that safe that changes everything. And only you know the combination. What are you talking about? I asked, confused. I don't know any combination. Think back, Mrs. Zhang insisted. Remember your 10th birthday? The special numbers your father taught you? And suddenly, I did remember. A rare moment of connection with Dad. Him teaching me a sequence of numbers that he said would be important someday. I had thought it was just a game. Another one of his lessons about patterns and logic. But now? Sarah's been trying to open that safe for weeks, Mrs. Zhang continued. She's even talked about having it cracked. But your father was very specific. What's inside is meant for you, only you. I felt a glimmer of hope for the first time since Dad's death. Whatever was in that safe, it was my last chance to understand why he had cut me out so completely. And maybe, just maybe, it held the key to reclaiming my place in the family legacy. But getting to the safe wouldn't be easy. Sarah had made it clear I wasn't welcome in the family home anymore. And as she knew I had the combination. Don't tell Sarah about this, I said to Mrs. Zhang. I'll figure out a way to get in. As I hung up the phone, my mind was already racing with possibilities. After years of living in Sarah's shadow, of trying to prove myself worthy of the Chen name, maybe this was my chance to finally understand the truth about my father's last wishes. What I didn't know then was that the contents of that safe would do more than just reveal secrets. They would shatter everything I thought I knew about my family, my sister, and the true meaning of inheritance. Getting into the house proved easier than I expected. Mrs. Zhang still had her spare key, and Sarah was away at a business conference in Singapore. What I didn't anticipate was how much it would hurt to walk through those empty halls again, each step echoing with memories. Dad's study looked exactly as it had the day of the will reading. His portrait still hung above the fireplace, stern and imposing, watching my every move. I approached it carefully, my hands shaking as I lifted it from the wall. There it was, the safe, small and unassuming, but potentially holding answers to questions I've been asking my entire life. I closed my eyes, breathing deeply as I recalled that day 16 years ago. Dad sitting beside me, patient for once, teaching me the sequence. "Remember, Emma," he'd said, "these numbers tell a story. Your story." 7 to 24, 12 to 9-3. My birthday. The day Mom died. The number of paintbrushes in my first art set. The safe clicked open. Inside was a single envelope, thick with documents and a USB drive. My heart pounding. I opened the envelope and began to read. "My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, it means you remembered. You always were more observant than anyone gave you credit for, especially me. I owe you an apology, one that's long overdue." Tears blurred my vision as I read on. The letter explained everything. Dad hadn't cut me out of the will out of disappointment. He'd done it to protect me. To protect both his daughters from a truth he carried for years. Chen Technologies, his $15 million empire, was built on stolen technology. He'd taken the core innovation from a former partner, driving the man to bankruptcy. That partner had died penniless, leaving behind a daughter who'd grown up in foster care. The guilt had eaten at Dad for years. He tried to find the daughter to make amends, to return what he'd stolen, but she'd vanished. The company's success was tainted, every dollar earned stained with betrayal. The USB drive contained proof, emails, contracts, the original patents, everything needed to expose the truth. "I couldn't leave the company directly," Dad wrote. "The board would have immediately made you CEO, and you would have been legally liable for what I did. Sarah, she's different. She understands business, understands that sometimes things get messy. But you, Emma, you have your mother's heart. You see the world in colors of right and wrong, not profit and loss. So I made a choice. Sarah gets the company, but you get the truth. And with it, the power to decide what happens next." I sat there, stunned, as the implications sank in. Dad hadn't rejected me. He trusted me with something far more important than money. He'd given me the power to right a wrong that had haunted him for decades. But before I could process what to do next, I heard footsteps in the hallway. "I knew you'd try something like this." Sarah stood in the doorway, her face flushed with anger. She must have cut her trip short, somehow knowing I'd make this move. "How dare you break in here? This is my house now, or have you forgotten?" "Did you know?" I asked, holding up the letter. "Did you know what Dad did?" Her expression flickered. Just for a moment, but it was enough. Of course I knew. Dad told me years ago. It's how business works, Emma. Sometimes you have to step on people to get ahead. There's a woman out there who grew up with nothing because of what Dad did, I said, my voice shaking. Her father died thinking he was a failure. Sarah's laugh was bitter. "And what are you going to do about it? Expose everything? Destroy the company? You'd be ruining yourself too. The Chen name would be worthless." She stepped closer, her voice softening. "Be reasonable, Emma. I can make this right. Come work for me at the company. I'll give you back your apartment, set you up with a nice salary. We can be a family again." For a moment, I wavered. The offer was tempting. A chance to reclaim my old life, to feel secure again. But then I thought about Dad's words. "You have your mother's heart." "No," I said firmly. "I can't pretend this is okay. That poor woman deserves to know the truth." Sarah's face hardened. "Then you leave me no choice." She pulled out her phone. "I'm calling security. They'll be here in minutes. It's your word against mine. Who do you think I'll believe?" The rightful owner of this house or the jealous sister who broke in? But I wasn't listening anymore. I was looking at the USB drive in my hand, remembering all the times I'd stood in Dad's shadow, feeling like I didn't measure up. Now I understood. He'd been preparing me for this moment all along. "You're right," I said, shocking her into silence. "It is my word against yours, but it's also these documents, these emails, these patents. And tomorrow morning, every major news outlet in the country will have copies." "You're bluffing," she whispered, but I could see the fear in her eyes. "Am I? You said it yourself. I never understood business, never understood when to stay quiet, to play along. So what makes you think I'll stay quiet now?" The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah stared at me, really seeing me perhaps for the first time. Not as her artistic little sister, but as someone capable of destroying everything she'd inherited. "What do you want?" she finally asked. "Justice," I replied simply. "We're going to find that woman, the daughter of the man Dad wronged, and we're going to make it right." What followed was months of intense negotiation, legal meetings, and hard conversations. We found her, Rebecca Torres, now 35, working as a teacher in Oregon. When we told her the truth about her father, she wept. Not for the money she'd lost, but for her father's vindication. In the end, we restructured the company. Rebecca received a third of the shares, her rightful inheritance. I received another third, not because I wanted it, but because Dad had been right. The company needed someone to be its conscience, not just its business mind. Sarah kept the final third and her position as CEO. But something had changed in her. The day we signed the new contracts, she pulled me aside. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "Not just for how I treated you after Dad died, but for who I became, for thinking money was more important than family. It wasn't an instant fix. Years of hurt don't heal overnight. But it was a start." A year later, Chen Technologies had transformed. Under Sarah's business acumen, my creative input, and Rebecca's fresh perspective, we turned it into something we could all be proud of. The company now funds art programs in underprivileged schools, my passion project. Rebecca established a scholarship fund in her father's name for young entrepreneurs. And that's safe. We kept it, empty now but serving as a reminder. Sometimes the greatest inheritances aren't measured in dollars and cents, but in the courage to stand up for what's right. Dad's portrait still hangs in the study, but I see him differently now. Not as the stern businessman who seemed disappointed in my choices, but as a father who trusted his artistic daughter to paint a better future, one brushstroke at a time. Sarah and I still have our moments of tension, our old habits of competition and mistrust. But now when I look at her across the conference table or at family dinners, I see something new in her eyes. Respect. Not for who she wanted me to be, but for who I am. As for me, I kept painting, but now my gallery shows tell a different story. They're about family, redemption, and the complex colors of truth. My latest piece hangs in the company lobby, a portrait of two sisters, standing together, neither one in the other's shadow. Sometimes visitors ask about it, and Sarah always tells them the same thing. It's about inheritance, not the kind you can put in a safe, but the kind that lives in your heart. She's right. Some inheritances are measured in millions, others in moments of truth. Dad left us both. We just had to learn how to balance the books. The morning I discovered my bakery had been cleaned out, I stood in the empty kitchen trying to process what was missing. Industrial mixers, specialty ovens, even the hand-carved rolling pins my grandmother had given me, all gone. But worse than the stolen equipment was the missing recipe book, 3 generations of family secrets bound in weathered leather. My name is Sophie Chen, and at 32, I was watching my husband dismantle my life's work piece by piece. "Looking for something?" James's voice echoed through the empty space. He leaned against the doorframe, twirling my grandmother's recipe book in his hands. "Why?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why would you do this?" He smiled, the same charming smile that had won me over 5 years ago. "Business, darling. Your little bakery was doing so well, I figured why not expand. Of course there can only be one premium bakery in this neighborhood. I should have seen this coming." The late-night phone calls, the mysterious meetings, the way he'd suddenly taken interest in the bakery's operations after years of dismissing it as my cute little hobby. But I'd been too trusting, too focused on building my dream to notice him dismantling it. "Those recipes have been in my family for generations," I said, watching him flip through the pages carelessly. They're not just recipes, they're my heritage. James laughed, the sound bouncing off the empty walls. Heritage doesn't pay the bills, Sophie, but these recipes, they're going to make me a fortune. James' Artisan Bakery opens next week, right across the street. My eyes darted to the window, where I could see the storefront being renovated. The sign was already up, gold letters proclaiming his name above what used to be an old bookstore. You're using my family's recipes to compete against me? Compete. He shook his head like I was being naive. There won't be any competition. I've taken everything, your equipment, your suppliers, even your head baker Mike. Face it, Sophie, you're done. What James didn't know was that I'd been expecting something like this. Not this exactly. I trusted him too much to imagine he'd go this far. But I'd learned from my grandmother never to keep all your secrets in one place. The recipe book he held so triumphantly, it wasn't the only one. If that's how you want to play this, I said quietly, then I wish you luck with the bakery. He blinked, clearly thrown by my calm response. That's it? No crying? No begging me to reconsider? Would it make a difference if I did? No, he admitted, tucking the book under his arm. This is business, Sophie. You're just not cut out for it. As he turned to leave, he paused in the doorway. Oh, and I've already filed for divorce. The papers should arrive this afternoon. Don't worry, I'm letting you keep this space, though I'm not sure what you'll do with an empty bakery. I waited until his footsteps faded before pulling out my phone. The first call was to my grandmother in Taiwan. Ah, ma, I said in Mandarin, it's happened. Just like you warned me it might. My grandmother's voice was strong despite her 90 years. He took the fake book. Yes. Everything else too. The equipment, the staff, even our supplier contracts. She laughed, a sound that always reminded me of wind chimes. Good. Let him have the simple recipes. The real ones are safer with us. I smiled, remembering the day she taught me about protecting family secrets. The recipe book James had stolen contained good recipes, the basic ones we use for everyday items. But the real treasures, the recipes that had made our family famous in Taiwan before the war forced them to flee, those were passed down differently. Are you ready? Amma asked. Once you start this path, there's no going back. I looked around my empty bakery, thinking about James's smug smile, his certainty that he'd destroyed me. I'm ready. Good. Check your email. I sent you the first set of real recipes. The ones your grandfather used to build our first bakery in Taiwan. The ones that brought lines around the block every morning. My phone pinged with the incoming email. What about the others? One set at a time, she said firmly. First, you prove you can master these, then we'll talk about the rest. After hanging up, I opened my laptop and clicked on the email. The recipes were written in traditional Chinese characters, each one accompanied by detailed notes about technique, timing, and the subtle variations that made them special. The first one was for our family's signature egg custard tarts, not the simplified version in James's stolen book, but the real recipe that had made my great-grandfather's bakery famous in Taipei. I touched the screen gently, tracing the characters with my finger. James thought he had taken everything, but he didn't understand what really made a bakery successful. It wasn't just equipment or staff or even recipes written on paper. It was the knowledge passed down through generations, the techniques that couldn't be stolen, the secrets that lived in the hands and hearts of those who had earned them. My phone buzzed with a text from Mike, my former head baker. Sophie, I'm sorry. James offered double my salary. I have kids to think about. I understood. James had money, family money he'd never earned but wielded like a weapon. He could offer higher salaries, better benefits, fancier equipment. What he couldn't buy was the soul of what made our baking special. The divorce papers arrived as promised that afternoon. James had been thorough. He wanted a clean break, offering me a settlement that looked generous on paper but was a fraction of what the bakery had been worth. I signed them without argument. Let him think he'd won. That evening, I went to the local restaurant supply store. The owner, Mr. Wong, had known my grandmother when she first came to America. I heard what happened, he said as I walked in. That husband of yours, taking everything. I nodded, pulling out a list. I need to start over, not everything at once, but the basics. He studied my list, then looked at me over his reading glasses. Your grandmother called. Said to give you whatever you need, no rush on payment. Mr. Wong, I couldn't. He held up his hand. Your grandmother gave my parents a loan when they first came to America. Said it was repayment for kindness shown to her family in Taiwan. Now it's my turn to help. Take what you need. Pay when you can. By midnight, my kitchen had a new mixer, a second-hand but reliable oven, and basic supplies. Not the top-of-the-line equipment James had stolen, but enough to start. I worked through the night, following my grandmother's detailed instructions for the egg custard tarts. The first batch wasn't perfect. These recipes required a level of precision I was still learning. But by sunrise, I had something close to what I remembered from my childhood visits to Taiwan. James's bakery was opening in a week. He had my equipment, my staff, and a book of simplified recipes he thought would bring him success. What he didn't have was what really mattered: the knowledge passed down through generations, the techniques that made ordinary ingredients extraordinary, and most importantly, the determination that came from having to fight for everything you had. Let him think he'd won. Let him open his fancy bakery with his stolen equipment and basic recipes. I had something better. I had my grandmother's wisdom, my family's real secrets, and a plan that would take more than fancy equipment to beat. The morning James's bakery opened, I watched from my empty storefront as crowds gathered across the street. He'd marketed aggressively, positioning himself as the neighborhood's new premium bakery destination. The line stretched around the block, full of people eager to try what he promised would be traditional recipes with a modern twist. I spent that day in my kitchen, perfecting my grandmother's egg custard tarts. By evening, the basic recipe had evolved into something extraordinary: delicate pastry that shattered like glass, custard that melted on the tongue. Not just good, but memorable. "These are perfect," Mr. Wong said, tasting one. He'd stopped by with another delivery of supplies. "Just like I remember from your grandmother's bakery in Taiwan." "Almost," I corrected. "I'm still learning." The next few weeks were a blur of practice and preparation. While James's bakery bustled with activity, I worked in silence, mastering one recipe at a time. My grandmother sent them gradually, each one accompanied by long phone calls where she shared the subtle details that made them special. A month after James's opening, I got my first glimpse of trouble in his paradise. Mike, my former head baker, was arguing with him outside the shop. "These aren't working," Mike insisted, waving a stack of papers, my old recipes. "The measurements are right, but something's missing. Customers are complaining." James' response was lost in the morning traffic, but his frustrated gesture said enough. The recipes weren't producing the results he'd expected. That's when I made my first move. I boxed up a dozen perfectly crafted egg custard tarts and walked them to Mrs. Lee's tea shop 2 blocks away. She'd been a regular customer before James guided my bakery. "Sophie," she exclaimed, hugging me. "We've missed you. That new place, it's not the same. Would you be interested in selling these?" I asked, opening the box. "Exclusive to your tea shop." She took one bite and her eyes widened. These are even better than before." "How much?" "Let's start small, 1 dozen each morning. We can adjust based on demand." Word spread quickly. Soon people were lining up at Mrs. Lee's before she opened, hoping to get one of my tarts before they sold out. I added a second tea shop, then a third, each with its own exclusive item from my grandmother's real recipes. 6 months later, James's initial buzz had faded. I watched his customer base dwindle as people realized his baked goods, while adequate, weren't special. The traditional recipes he'd stolen were proving mediocre in execution. That's when my grandmother sent the second set of recipes, the ones for our family's legendary moon cakes. "The timing is perfect," she said during our nightly call. "Mid-Autumn Festival is coming. These were your great-grandfather's pride." I spent weeks practicing, learning the intricate techniques that made these mooncakes different from any others. The delicate balance of flavors, the precise ratio of ingredients, the way the crust achieved that perfect golden sheen. When Mid-Autumn Festival arrived, I had partnerships with every Chinese tea shop and restaurant in the city. My mooncakes, each one crafted by hand following centuries-old techniques, became the talk of the community. James noticed. How could he not? His bakery, which had started so promisingly, was struggling to maintain steady business. The recipes he'd stolen weren't drawing crowds like they used to. One evening, he showed up at my door, still wearing his chef's coat. "How are you doing this?" he demanded. "I have your recipes. I have better equipment." I have everything that made your bakery successful. I wiped flour from my hands, taking in his frustrated expression. Do you? Or do you just have papers with ingredients and measurements? The recipes aren't working quite like you expected, are they? I smiled. Turns out baking isn't just about following instructions. It's about knowledge passed down through generations, techniques that can't be stolen. His face reddened. You changed the recipes before I took them. That's it, isn't it? No, James. I just never showed you the real ones. The ones you stole. They're good recipes. Basic, serviceable, but not special. This isn't over, he snapped, turning to leave. Actually, it is. Check your sales figures. Check your reviews. People want something authentic, not just expensive equipment and fancy marketing. Over the next year, I expanded slowly but steadily. Each new recipe my grandmother shared became a signature item at a different location. No big storefronts, no flashy advertising, just carefully chosen partnerships with businesses that understood the value of quality. James tried everything to compete. He hired new bakers, while even more expensive equipment, ran promotional campaigns. But he couldn't replicate what made my baking special, the generations of knowledge behind each recipe. 18 months after he'd gutted my bakery, James's business was failing. I heard through the grapevine that he was trying to sell. But no one wanted to buy a struggling bakery with mediocre reviews. That's when my grandmother announced she was coming to visit. It's time, she said. You're ready for the last set of recipes, the most special ones. She arrived with a small weathered notebook, the real family recipe book passed down through generations. Inside were the recipes that had made our family's original bakery in Taiwan legendary. Your great-grandfather started with nothing, she told me as we sat in my kitchen. Just knowledge and determination. Sometimes losing everything is the best way to build something stronger. We spent 2 weeks together, her teaching me the final techniques, sharing stories of our family's history. Each recipe came with a lesson, a piece of wisdom earned through generations of persistence. The day she left, she hugged me tightly. You've built something beautiful, Sophie, not just a business, but a legacy. A month later, I received an unexpected email from James's lawyer. He wanted to sell me his bakery. Equipment, space, everything had a fraction of what it was worth. His business was failing, and he needed out. I thought about it, remembering the day he'd stood in my empty kitchen, so smug with his stolen recipes. Now here he was, trying to sell me back what he'd taken. My response was simple. No thank you, I've built something better. And I had. My partnerships had grown into a network of specialty locations across the city, each one featuring unique items made from my family's real recipes. People traveled from other states to try my mooncakes during Mid-Autumn Festival. Food magazines wrote articles about the mysterious baker whose traditional pastries were redefining the artisan bakery scene. James's bakery closed 6 months later. I watched them remove his sign, remembering his words about there only being room for one premium bakery in the neighborhood. He'd been right about that part. The day they cleared out his space, I stood in my kitchen, now fully equipped with tools I bought myself, and prepared a batch of egg custard tarts. As the familiar scents filled the air, I thought about everything that had happened. James had taken my equipment, my staff, and a book of recipes he thought would guarantee his success. But he never understood what really mattered. The knowledge passed down through generations, the techniques that couldn't be stolen, and the strength that comes from having to rebuild from nothing. My phone buzzed with a text from my grandmother, ready for the next chapter. I smiled, looking at the lines of people waiting outside my partner locations across the city, each one eager to taste something authentic, something special, something built on generations of family tradition. Ready, I replied, because sometimes losing everything is just the beginning of building something extraordinary. James had tried to destroy my dream, but instead, he forced me to build an empire. One recipe, one lesson, one carefully chosen partnership at a time. And that was a success no one could steal.